Thank you for sitting down. Obviously the second piece of this isn't going to be quite as extensive because there's a few less questions, but definitely still want to dig into this. So the section that we had left off on was going through kind of childhood, and now the next part is fatherhood.
Okay.
So obviously you talked to me a little bit about your marriage and obviously your dating life before that and kind of who you were when you were younger. But the question that I wanted to ask you was, did you always want to be a father?
Oh yeah. I
Do you
loved
just do
kids.
that always?
Yeah.
Okay.
Always loved kids. Um, I had some cousins that were like 15 years younger than me,
Uh-huh.
and I would watch them, and they were boys, and we would play football, soccer, go to the creek, to just like, yeah. Yeah, I always knew that I wanted to be a father.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I've pretty much known since I was a little kid that I definitely wanted to be a father, but
Hmm.
haven't gotten there yet. So we'll see when that blessing comes along, if it comes along. So when you think about your parenting style,
Hmm.
um, do you model it a lot after how your parents raised you? Um, if you don't, what are some of the differences? And then, what are the biggest lessons that you took from your parents, uh, or in contradiction to how they raised you?
I would say it definitely parallels my parents.
Mhm.
I often hear people these days say they try to be on the other side of the pendulum compared to their parents, or they end up being on that other side of the pendulum compared to their parents. But I think I was so lucky with the parents that I had, and a number of reasons. One, they were genuinely, and I mean genuinely, the most supportive parents there are. A
Okay.
lot of parents will tell their kids they can be anything. A lot of parents will tell them, like, oh, yeah, you can be an astronaut, but how about you just try and be a dentist? I mean, if you want to try to be an astronaut, you can, but maybe just be a dentist, or if they have aspirations that are abnormal, parents want to drift them back into like something like to be a dentist.
Yeah.
Where my parents, they genuinely like, well, what can we do to help you be an astronaut and go to Mars and work with Elon? It's like, let's do it if that's what you want to do. And they were genuine about it from the time that we were little to today, if you have a discussion with them. So taking that, and then also we got a lot of freedom.
Okay.
We had a lot of freedom as kids, and it was kind of this it was different between my sisters and me, because I'm sure because I was a boy, they were girls, they didn't necessarily have the freedom.
Right.
Um, but for me, it was like, you have the freedom, don't get in trouble, don't lie. You lie to me once, you know,
It
like
changes.
that changes things.
Yeah.
So I was a kid, like 15 years old with my driver's license, and I would go out to parties. And if it got busted by the cops, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking. So I would just go home, and people are getting MIPs and DUIs. And it's like, I never did that because I never wanted to break the trust of my father.
Yeah.
It's why I didn't drink in high school. It's why I didn't drink in college. It's like, I did not want even one mistake to break the trust, because he's like, get away with whatever you can while you're young, get away with whatever you can, but don't get in trouble, man. And so it's like, where's that boundary? So with my kids, bringing it back to my kids and my parenting style, it's like, I try as hard as I can to treat them with the respect of adults. I don't talk to them in a way that I wouldn't talk to a friend.
Okay.
If they don't want to wear a jacket outside, I could give a fuck if they wear a jacket and are freezing. Why would I wouldn't tell my buddy, oh, you should wear a jacket. I wouldn't tell my wife you should wear a jacket. So I do not care if he wears a jacket. I don't remind them to bring their water bottle. I wouldn't remind my wife or my buddies to bring their water bottle. Like, that's on them. Now, someone might say, well, then you're dealing with like a cranky kid who's cold. And it's like, I'll deal with that because of the lessons that he's going to learn. Exactly. You have to deal with it once.
Or twice.
Versus other parents, yeah, maybe twice, but it's like other parents will, they're going to do this thing where they continuously fight day in and day out with their kid every time to get them to wear that jacket when it's cold outside. It's like, it watching other parents, it drives me nuts because I'm like, you just make your life hard. Like, they do.
I believe it.
And here's like another freedom. Like, I don't tell my sons that they can't hit each other. I really don't. I don't want them to go through life as telling them and programming them that they cannot defend themselves. How many children in school will get physically bullied and have this programming ingrained in them their entire lives that it's not okay to hit or defend themselves? Now, I am going to make sure that my sons are never bullies. Otherwise, I'll take them in the backyard and show them what a bully does to them, but I don't get in the way of them talking with other kids, or if they're fighting amongst themselves. It's like, you guys got to figure that out, because how long are we going to be there? What happens when they're in an actual social setting and that helicopter parent isn't there to talk for them?
Right.
When they want to buy something from the store, I am not involved. I will like literally go somewhere else and they take their cash and they take that thing and they go buy it from them. And people will be looking around like, why is this little kid here? And I'm watching, but I'm not doing it for them. So a lot of freedom, respect, and within that freedom, the boundaries is just like, my kids don't watch TV, but my kids never see me watch TV. My kids don't eat junk food, but I never buy junk food. So they like steak. What's up, big guy?
Dad, can I go in the car to grab something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the one that you got Hot Wheels with?
Yeah, that's the little guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. So moving on to the next question, what do you think is the most difficult thing about being a father for you specifically? And then if you want to talk about it in general, go for it.
For me specifically is the most difficult thing is conveying to your wife that the way men parent is because they're picturing that little boy when he's 30. And women parent a child in the moment for who they are, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old.
Right.
And for me, the most difficult thing is because my wife, you could say, has trauma, or she has, a very bad taste in her mouth, how her father parented. So there will be things that trigger her. Like if I talk about being hard on my sons, if I talk about if I even used to use the word discipline, and then I would have to be like, the word discipline comes from the word disciple. And just making sure that her triggers are taken care of so that she doesn't so she doesn't have these flashbacks of the things that her dad did with her brothers and or her and her sister. Because I'm not that guy. So that for me, that is probably was the most difficult thing. And obviously it gets easier.
Yeah, of course. What do you think is the kind of building off of that? What do you think is the most difficult thing about being a father in today's time?
Fathers want to live through their children because they didn't amount to anything. I see that a lot because my sons are in a lot of sports. They're in a lot. And by a lot, I mean, it's like there'll be a season where they're in football, they're in wrestling, they're in golf and gymnastics all at the same time in the same week. Being my wife's stay-at-home mom and me working from home and we unschool our kids, it's easy because of just the time as a family we have.
Right.
But I will see so many dads wanting their 8-year-old to be the best 8-year-old there is. I'll see so many dads harping on their kid about the push-ups when I can visually tell that their father can't do a single push-up themselves. And I'll see these dads calling out their sons in front of the teams like, is that the best you got? But it's like he can't even do what his own son is doing.
Right.
And when you look at youth sports across the board and you talk to high-level coaches, I've talked to some of the best coaches in Los Angeles who run private academies, who kids go and play UCLA, USC, and they talk about how parents are literally like ruining youth sports.
Yeah.
It's the parents who are doing it. It's the reason why you see this giant decline in boys participating in a number of sports around the age of 13 because they finally can tell their parents, like, I don't want to fucking play. You guys made me play. You guys make this not fun. So I think there's this big thing on, you know, parents living through their kids and not focusing on their own marriage. And because they want something, because to me, parenting's easy. I just look at it different than everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, we want to have these excuses of like, man, my 6-year-old just won't eat anything except chicken nuggets. And it's like, that's so weird. I didn't know your kid had the ability to like get some money, get in the car and go explore McDonald's. They know about chicken nuggets because of you. And you say your kid has a problem that the kid will only eat chicken nuggets. How many mornings were you only feeding your kid chicken nuggets?
Right.
You know, it's like every complaint that any parent has, unless you have like a special needs kid and that is something different, everybody else, every problem that you don't like about your child is 100% because of you. There's no such thing as bad kids, only bad leaders.
Cool perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I agree with a lot of what you've said because I've seen it myself. I was a youth coach for 5 years, 4.5 years, something like that. I coached girls first in soccer, and then I coached boys. And I was really lucky. I had parents that just kind of agreed with my philosophy from day one.
Mm-hmm.
When I taught soccer, I told the parents, I said, I kind of look at it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
I said in the United States, we tend to teach a lot more kind of the Germanic way of playing, which is perfection.
Yes.
You use your head, your feet, and you do this and then the other. And I said, I'm more of the Spanish or Italian style, which is you play the game with everything except your hands, unless you're the goalkeeper, obviously. But it's more about using everything as your advantage as opposed to not. So I was very lucky in that from a young, I guess you could say from a young age. I was only 23 at the time. It's crazy to think that I taught girls 12 years ago. But anyway, the point being was that I was very lucky in that parents didn't really try to coach over me or take the fun out of their kids because they saw that I just knew so much more than they did. I did have one parent who literally screamed during a game and said, "Don't listen to what he's saying, Lucas. Do it this way." And then the wife literally looked at him and was like, "Oh, I can't believe you did that." And the rest of the parents were like, "Wow, you contradicted Coach David." So then he came up and he talked to me later. He's like, "Look, I'm so sorry. I just really wanted him to shoot." And I said, "I wanted him to shoot too, but he didn't have the angle. So I'm trying to teach him to pass in that spot. The team has to win, not just Lucas."
Yeah.
And I get it now. I said, because a college coach is going to care more about winning than your son being a superstar. And if you want your kid to play college, he has to be the best player that he can be. And after that, he literally looked at me and he was like, "You know what? I never thought about it that way." And I said, "Yeah, because I've had to sit down with elite coaches and interview them and ask." I used to be the reporter for the school paper in college. And I was the coach's favorite reporter because I actually took the time to listen to what his strategy was instead of just dumping on the team.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny how you say, like, there are so many parents that try to live through their kids, and the
Yeah.
level of perfection they expect from their kids is just, they can't even achieve it themselves, but they want their kids to do so much better.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is the thing that motivates you the most in terms of wanting to be a better father? And I know you just talked about, obviously discipline and coming from the word disciple. But for you, I guess, as opposed to a discipline, which I think that you approach many things as a discipline, what really motivates you about being a better father?
Man, there's a number of things. One of the things that motivates me to be a better father is because statistically you'll have the same marriage as your children. I mean, your children will statistically have the same marriage as their parents. So if that's true, and there's going to be people listening to this who will say, oh no, I'm totally different than my mom or my dad. And it's like, well, the son could be just like his mom, but full of testosterone. Or the daughter could be just like the dad and have in the feminine, or trying to take on a more masculine role because she's like her dad. So like I don't want anyone to think of like just because think that the boy's going to be just like the dad or the daughter's going to be just like the mom.
Right.
It can be even worse when the guy takes after his mom but a testosterone filled virgin, or a daughter who's like, man, I had such a strong father, I'm going to be just like him. And now she's trying to take on this more masculine, and just marry a passive man who she can control. So it doesn't mean it's just directly like lineal, but so me being the best husband I can be to set the example for my sons on how they should love a woman and treat a woman. That's first and foremost. Two, I believe we live in a culture where there is no rite of passage and there is nothing that determines when a boy becomes a man. And you could say that, if I'm Native American, that culturally Native Americans in history used to have rite of passages turning boys into men. The Spartans, the Mongols, the Knights, they all had rite of passages, specifically designed stages that they would take a boy from 7 or 8, and we'll just say the Knights, he became a page. And then about like 13, 14, he became a squire. And then it wasn't until he was like 17, then he was a knight. Okay. And you were literally being taught by someone. Someone else was discipling you how to be a good page, how to be a good squire, how to be a knight. Okay. The Spartans, you had the agoge. You were literally taken at 7 years old and you were taught basic combat skills. And then you would be taught skills with weapons. And then you would have to go off and actually like fight somebody. Native Americans, they had similar things of fasting and surviving in the wilderness by yourself at this age, and then having to go and kill someone at this age. I'm not saying we need to teach kids to kill, but if we look even again in the Mongols, if we look at these societies of men, we've always had something like that. And now it's magically, we expect men to just know what it means to be a man one day. It's like fairy dust. Guess what? You're a man now. So what motivates me is to actually parent intentionally. How do you intentionally parent? Like, how do you actually have a plan? And my plan may be different because both my boys, their personalities are different. So I'm going to approach it. I'm going to do a little check and adjust throughout these years with them because they're so different. I may have them. One of the things that they're always going to do is wrestle until they're 18. This is going to be something that's part of their rite of passage. But because one of them is more of a chess player, maybe I also incorporate jujitsu with him. Because the one is he's more of a brute. He's more of a he's aggressive. It's like, maybe I don't put him in jujitsu because his aggression could be used much far better in the multiple styles of wrestling, folk style, freestyle, Greco. And maybe he doesn't get into to jiu-jitsu until it's something that he wants to do, just because their personalities are different. The one is a thinker. He's a chess player. He's calm. He's just like, okay, step one, step two equals this step, versus the other one. So it's like, how do I just funnel how they are, their personalities, in through these stages of page, squire, and knight? And I don't think we take the time, but it's something that I plan on doing, is literally instilling those things into my sons.
I have a lot of value for what you just said. My grandfather, the rite of passage was beating him in Axis and Allies. The first time I ever beat him, my grandfather, having gone to the Naval War College, like I told you about, graduated first in his class. I was the first grandson that he had. We have a lot of, I guess he had a lot of granddaughters, and I was the oldest of the three grandsons. And then he had my brother as well, who is my half brother, so it was his step grandson. But he was much older, so he didn't really get the same amount of time to spend, teaching him these lessons. But my rite of passage was beating him, this man who at the time was probably like mid-70s, and beating him in Axis and Allies. I beat him first as the Allies, which, it's easier to win as the Allies than as the Axis. And, I'll never forget that he said, it was like, well, now that you beat me with the Allies, what do you want to do? I said, no, now I have to beat you as the Axis. Because if I only beat you with the Allies, I won with the easier team. I won't get your respect until I beat you with the Axis. And he kind of chuckled, and he said, okay. And then when I was 17 years old, I beat him with the Axis. Didn't say a word. He just got up and he shook my hand. And
that is cool.
It was an amazing feeling, because he ended up telling my Uncle Mark, who loved playing Axis and Allies with him. I mean, they played all the time. And he said to Uncle Mark, he was like, as good as you are at playing with Germany, he goes, David would wipe the floor with you with Germany. He said, I've never seen anybody ever play that calculated and that precise with Germany. And he goes, he wiped me in 3 turns. And, that was my rite of passage with him. But, with the things that you and I spoke about just a couple of days ago, I actually talked to my dad about this, because, as you know, we wrote this book together, and a lot of what we did with Gabriel Locke was we wanted to give people kind of a framework of what it is to be a healthy man, in addition to, obviously writing about what lawyers actually do and all these different things. And, how you had said in the interview, I'd mentioned it to him. I said, Dad, Jesse and I were talking, and Jesse said there's not really a playbook for how to be a man. Like, we don't have these things anymore like we used to. And he looked at me and he said, we don't. Because I've been practicing family law for so long. I've seen divorces, left and right. There's no playbook on the marriage. There's no playbook on this. People just don't know it. And unless they're reading the Bible, or they have these strong family ties and conversations, men are left with nothing. Like there is no, and I think it's just people in general, right? I think that there are women who struggle with wanting to know what it is to be a more feminine woman, as opposed to having to take on that masculine energy, et cetera, et cetera. But these things they're just not explained. So I completely resonate with everything that you're saying in terms of, rite of passage, and then also kind of having a playbook to step into these things.
Yeah. One of my good buddies, he was messing with me the other day that, Matt Walsh came out with the documentary, What is a Woman? He's like, maybe your calling is
What is a man?
Documentary on what is a man.
Hey, if you ever want to sit down and write a book about the man's playbook, I'm all in. I will help you.
I think we should.
I think we definitely should. So leading on to the next question. So how would you say that you've grown as a person in becoming a father? Like, obviously I think everybody here can agree that you're pretty well put together. But how would you say that you've grown as a person since you became a father?
Well, my growth story is a little backwards, because me and my girlfriend had a son. We weren't married yet. I did it the kind of opposite. So it was once he came around, I realized that I really needed to step up as just a human being in society, and for the benefit of him and the relationship with his mother. Because I had always told her, and I meant it, that if we never worked out, I would always take care of her because she would forever be the mother of my son. And I don't know how much of that she believed, because she's a big person and actions speak louder than words. And she came from a family where you say things that you don't mean, and that's normal and it's acceptable. But I meant it. It's like, I will always take care of you. And then I realized, like, I'm doing this thing backwards. Like, we should have been married and then doing this. So, I apologize. What was can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah, what I was asking you was, how do you feel that you've grown as a person from becoming a father?
Yeah. Okay. So here's how I'm wrapping all that in is
Sure.
I had to, really get rid of me just being a man child, because now I'm responsible for this human and I'm not married. If you were to ask my wife today, she would say, like, a year before we had that child, we were not in a good spot. And I had to essentially just look in the mirror and change myself, because I wasn't going to be setting a good example for him by any means. And I had to, didn't want to answer questions of, like, why was mom and dad not together, or why was her last name different? So I had to really, like, focus on my relationship.
No, that's awesome. Actually, that you kind of answered the next question at the same time. It was, did you feel like becoming a father made you a better husband? And obviously, the answer to that is yes, right? You became a husband after you became a father.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of answered that one. So here's a good one, and I think you'll enjoy this. How do you measure the successful balance of provider and father with your children?
I mean, how do I measure that one? I don't know how I would answer the measuring, but I know that I'm being a good father when I'm still dating my wife.
Okay.
And I always want to go back to that, because we should love our spouse more than our children. And culturally, some people would probably say it's the opposite. I've literally had people in the comments say, like, that's crazy. You should love your children more than your spouse. But they eventually leave you. And then you're left with a roommate, someone who you may think you love, but you don't know. So if I am going to be a good father, it just goes back to, like, I have to make sure that the love that me and my wife have for one another is so great that it sets an example and a tone. And then in regards to provider, you mean, like, the amount of time that, like, a man spends in his work?
Yeah, because I know that for you, obviously, it's a little bit different because you work from home.
Mm-hmm.
So you do get more time with your children, especially because they're homeschooled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for you, perhaps in terms of the split of that time, it's a bit easier because your children are around you as you're working and they're seeing you work and those kinds of things. But there are certain people, like, for example, I think about the relationship I have with my father. I think we have an excellent relationship. I mean, we wrote a novel together. We've written a few manuscripts together, and we didn't kill each other. So it's funny when people ask me, do you believe in God? I go, I have proof of it right here because I wrote something with my lawyer father and we didn't murder each other.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was growing up, my mother stayed at home much more than my father. I was also raised by my grandmother and my grandfather because I spent a lot of time. I obviously told you about my paternal grandfather. So I had a bit more of a family tribe that raised me as my father was at the office, because there's no way he was going to be able to spend time meeting clients at our house, right? And, like, this was way before, technology and all these things. So I guess the way that I would pose this question to you is for fathers who have to leave the home to be able to provide for their families, whatever jobs they have, how do you help them reconcile with being good parents while being good fathers, while also having to be providers and being outside of the house or outside of the home for that many hours. Because I think there's a big struggle, and I think it's a question that a lot of men ask themselves and ask, members of their tribe. I'm out here busting my butt to provide for my family, but my kids are telling me I'm not spending enough time with them. And I have my own perspective of that answer, but I just want to hear from you.
Well, biblically, the men in the Bible in the Old Testament, the men of that time, they were Jews who were sheep herders, okay? And they would work from sun up to sundown. And then they were called to disciple their children. So the time that they were off work is when they would actually punch in the clock. And then they would tend to their family for the rest of the evening, however late that was. So we're not called to be a provider and then you're done. It's merely the start of your day. And now someone might say, well, you're working from home, blah, blah, blah. I didn't always work from home. I had a corporate job. There was times during the corporate job, it's like 50, 60 hours because they put you in a department that's totally screwed. Okay. And you have to fix it. So, and back then I would get up at 3:30 every day to do my run, the gym and everything, go in at 7 or 6:30. And then so I could be home around like 3:30. And then it's like, how do I, again, spend the time with the family from then on and not kick the feet up? And being a provider, we want to make sure we're providing in abundance so our family can flourish. Because I've also talked to men who feel like they only need to provide the basic necessities. And if you're only providing the basic necessities, subconsciously, what are you speaking into, whether it's the energy of the minds of that family, your wife and your children? They're only going to accept the most basic necessities in a relationship from whoever they end up being with, especially if it's daughters. So we need to make sure that it is giving our all. It's like the only legacy that you will ever leave is your children. The government can come and take all your money and all your property away from you whenever they choose. But your children are the legacy. So how is it that you want to define your legacy, but with the children that are going to grow up and make an impact on society? We all have that choice.
I appreciate that answer. Yeah, for me, I get that. My father, spending so many hours away, my dad maximized every single minute we ever had together. The car rides to and from school, my favorite thing was geography. My dad would ask me, what's the longest river in the world? The Nile. What's the biggest river by volume of water? The Amazon. What is the largest country by land mass in the world? Russia. By population, China. I mean, these were things, it was every single day. Or my father was a connoisseur of many times fiction books rather than nonfiction books, but very high level fiction books. I mean, some Bernard Cornwell, not to be stereotypical, but even Harry Potter. But it wasn't just listening to it in the car. I remember he would ask me, so this passage we just heard, did you notice the rhythm of how this author set that up to get you to this feeling at the end of this passage? Much more analytical, deep level questions as opposed to the minimum. So I really appreciate that answer because even though I had minimal time with my dad, none of the experience was ever the minimum. It was always maximized as much as possible.
Oh, that's good.
So how do you define being a good father then?
Oh man, I mean,
the tough stumping question of the interview.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever actually had someone ask me, how do you define a good father? Probably, loving your wife and preparing your children for life versus letting them figure it out. Because there's a level of figuring it out along the process, but not leaving the mystery of what does it mean to be a man. You're
Right.
parenting intentionally. So here's the thing. about parenting intentionally is we can have a plan and fuck up our kids. And guess what? It was the choice that we made. And so we should be okay with that. Versus parenting them based off what society tells you. And then they get fucked up. And you're like, well, I mean, I did what society said. Versus
Right.
doing what you truly want.
Yep. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I really agree with that. So that actually leads us to the next section, since you were talking about preparing your kids. So now the section that we're moving on to is masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, this is really in the realm of your forte. But how do you define a masculine man?
I define a masculine man as someone who is very dangerous and has it under control. It withstands time. So it doesn't matter if it's today, the Oregon Trail, kind of how we mentioned last week, that was only 150 years ago. Less than 150 years ago was the Oregon Trail.
I love how you say last week. It was only 2 days ago.
Okay, 2 days ago, yes. And or if it was 10,000 years ago, today, or the zombie apocalypse. It's my masculine. My definition of masculine is the same as the definition that I express on what it is to be good at being a man.
Sure.
Transcends time.
I agree.
You understand courage, risking yourself for the benefit of your tribe or community or family. And it's not out of fear or anger, because that's not courage. It's like honor. Do you actually do what you say you're going to do? Are you respected? Do other men desire to have you in their tribe? If that zombie apocalypse comes, like, how many people are like, can I get you on my team? And then how are we leveling up in everything that we're trying to do every single day?
Yeah.
Versus just being complacent and thinking life is good.
Yeah.
Because yes, we live in 2025. None of us have a reason to, be down about anything. You can just take your phone and get whatever you want, and it'll be at your door in a couple minutes. Okay.
Provided you've got the cash, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a great Mike Tyson quote about when he was welfare in the 80s wasn't big screen TVs like it is now.
No, I know.
So don't necessarily always need to have the cash. But
yeah,
does it transcend time? Because a lot of people I'll ask, like, do you know what a masculine man was? I put a poll out. You remember when I put a poll out on my Instagram? You even answered to it.
I think so, yeah.
100% of the people who answered said they knew what a masculine man was. And I was like, I am very interested. A lot of the followers, I have no idea who they are.
Right.
And so it's like, I'm very interested. And I want to actually do a deep dive in this. Because when you look up the definition of masculinity, it just says a man who is masculine. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's a circular definition.
So then you look up masculine, what is that definition? And it's like a feature of a boy or man. Okay. Still, it's the circular definition. It's the cat chasing the tail, realizing it's like, we're just saying the same thing the whole time.
Yep.
So it's like, I want to come up with one, because the reason I posted that is because I saw a woman on LinkedIn. She's a masculinity coach, and she helps men take on their masculine role. And I thought to myself, how is it that a woman defines masculinity? Now, there are features of men that women like.
Sure.
But I don't believe that a woman defines masculinity. Masculinity is forged amongst men. And it is men who determine if another man is masculine. Based on those zombie apocalypse, who do I want in a tribe? Can he fight? Can he defend? Can he patrol? Maybe he has other skills. He can build a shelter, etc. But then how do we cultivate those men to also have a mindset that all the women and children feel safe and secure, even emotionally, having that strength under control, being of sound mind. Um, but it is essentially men who define that, not women.
Of
I'm
course.
sorry. And so that's what actually even made me throw it out there, because it's like, and I want to be more precise when I use the word masculine in my own content, because it's easy to say, masculinity isn't this. And it's
Right.
like,
It's really easy
well,
to say that.
it's like I see a lot of masculinity isn't this, or this is what a masculine man does. And it's like, well, that is merely a trait
Right.
of a man. And maybe he is masculine, maybe he is not. Maybe he's just a moral man, but it doesn't mean he's a masculine man, because we have to understand there's a reason why we all at some point root for a bad guy, or we root for a superhero, the Hulk. You got like Batman, and then there's like bad guys in different movies who someone is like, we as young kids or even adults, we are rooting on these guys. And it's like, it's that Jordan Peterson thing of like, we all have that inner monster as men,
Of
and it's
course.
just contained in this day and age, and we can't release it. So we root on the bad guy or the good guy, but we view them as an example of a masculine man. Now, someone might not like that you can say that a masculine man is a bad guy, but we often don't want to associate a masculine man only with someone who's based on morals, because that moral man may be the first guy to accidentally push a little girl in front of him in the line of danger. But on an everyday thing, he might be the nicest guy, a moral guy. But a woman can have all those same qualities of that moral, nice guy. So it doesn't actually, there's no differentiating factor. And then the bad guy might just be a perceived bad guy, and all he's doing is defending his own tribe or community. He's just on the other team. And maybe his morals go against our morals, depending on who it is or what the character is. I'm not speaking for all bad guys.
No,
Some
I
bad
didn't
guys
think
are
so.
worse than others.
I
But
wouldn't, I wouldn't put
we
the
have to
Joker.
understand.
I wouldn't put the Joker as a masculine man, but
No. So, but you get what I'm saying.
I do.
And there's a lot to that I think
I think a
needs to be
good
discussed.
I think a good example of that, since you had mentioned kind of heroes or superheroes, is I think a lot of the anti-heroes. So, for example, if you look at Daredevil, right, and I bring this up as an example that Disney just came out with Daredevil Born Again.
Okay. I don't know who he is, but keep going.
So Daredevil is the blind lawyer who moonlights as a vigilante at night, but he has a moral code. He doesn't break it. He's in really good shape. He never allowed being blind to be his Achilles heel, for example. If anything, it's one of his greatest strengths because he has this incredible hearing that allows him to do the things that he does. But the flip side character, at least in the show, at least in the previous iteration of the show, was the Punisher, a guy who I believe was a former Marine. His family gets brutally murdered, if I'm not mistaken, by a gang. Driven with his code, his moral code, which is just these people are unsavable. There's no such thing as like putting them in jail. You just have to liquidate them. Now, in my opinion, I think that they are equally masculine men, right? I personally favor Daredevil or Matt Murdock's, view of justice, which is that I'm going to catch these bad guys, but I'm not going to just end their lives. I don't have the right to do so. Whereas the Punisher is, there is no saving, there is no redemption. You eliminate them. I'm out for vengeance type of deal. But I think that when you look at that, you're absolutely correct. You have an extremely masculine anti-hero and an extremely masculine hero. And sometimes they go toe to toe because of the difference in their ideologies. That one I think is a little bit easier to agree with you on that. When I think about, a not so masculine man who might encompass some of those traits, I think of the Joker, an absolute raving lunatic out to destroy communities, doesn't really want anyone to be a part of his tribe unless they're just destroying everything.
Mm-hmm.
Versus Batman, who we understand obviously has a good moral code,
Yeah, yeah.
the epitome, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. But I agree with you in terms of the Punisher and Daredevil. That I think is a much easier comparison as opposed to somebody who's kind of like a raving lunatic. We don't want people to go out and be jokers. We definitely want them to be moral.
No, yeah, and Joker doesn't fall under the example for me by any means. And I looked up the movie Daredevil, and
That one had been,
on
yeah.
what's the guy's name? John Barthnell, who was a Punisher.
Jimmy Bernthal or
Is it
James.
Jimmy or
Was
John?
no, I think it's James.
I think it's I think I just looked it up. His name is John,
Yeah, I'm sorry, my bad.
right? But he's in the
Yeah,
new
he is.
Daredevil, right?
I think he might be. I haven't gotten to that part in the episodes yet. John Bernthal, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so he's the doppelganger I get the most on the internet.
I mean, I definitely see it.
Yeah. And it's so funny. When I do the lives, the like TikTok or Instagram lives, there are always someone who's like, yo, John Barthnell, or however you say his last name.
Bernthal.
Bernthal, yeah. I
That's
will get those, and it's funny. Because I didn't know who he was for a long time, and then I had to look him up.
I
It's
don't.
like, that's not bad.
I know that you don't. I know that you don't drink coffee, so I won't send you another mug. But I think what I'll do is, I'm gonna send you like a tumbler or a water glass or something. It's gonna have your picture on one side, and it's gonna have his picture on the other side.
Nice. I think that would be funny, and I would probably use that because I'm a big raw milk drinker, and I
Yeah.
use mugs, and so that would be my milk mug
Okay, I'll get you.
for sure.
All right, that'll be your Christmas gift for the year. Um, thank you for indulging me on that. All right, so what are the best examples of masculinity that you have and had when you were growing up, and why?
I'm going to say the best one I had was my father.
Okay.
I remember this story very vividly. He was a big dude, and he was an intimidating guy too. And we hear people screaming middle of the day, and we like go out on the front lawn, look down the street, and there's a guy and gal just screaming at each other. They're fighting. Not physically, but they're screaming bloody murder at each other. My dad just nonchalantly was like, there's nothing manly about a man who's aggressive towards women or children. And he was the kind of guy who could just walk down there and handle that dude and tell the lady to get in the car and go drive off. Like, my mom had a number of stories when we were young of them being at concerts and this and that and stuff. He was so he was the masculine figure. Now the thing that I probably wish he would have done, but at the same time I wouldn't change anything about past, is because my biological father killed himself when I was like 18 months.
I'm sorry.
My mother wanted to protect me a lot, and maybe it was conscious, subconscious, I don't know. And I know that there was times where he would want to parent me different, and my mom would come in to protect me, even like 10, 12, 14, the whole bit. But he was a hardworking dude. I think I've said this on a podcast once, but in 30 years, he missed 2 days of work. One was only a Monday because on Sunday he broke his ribs. Monday he went to the doctor. They said, you got 4 broken ribs. And then he just went back to work the next day. The other one was he had food poisoning from seafood. And so he missed a day, just went back the next day. And he had missed 2 days in 30 years. And I just remember thinking like, fuck, dude, he puts his boots on no matter what. And like, that's admirable. Like, I admire that.
Yeah, I admire that a lot too. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, he was never, when I talk about like the quick to anger, he could get pissed and he could give you a look, but like he loved on my sisters. He like definitely was like good. And my buddies would say it was crazy how affectionate my parents would show affection for each other in front of them, because they're like, man, I've never seen my parents kiss. And I'd be like, that's so weird.
I
Like
mean,
for
I'm
me,
not gonna
because it
lie.
was just, I didn't know any different.
Yeah, my parents are the same way. They've always been very. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything, obviously, but you know,
Mm-hmm.
my parents have always been very affectionate toward each other. I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
best things about my parents is conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, whenever they had to parent us together, it was always a conversation between parents but parent to adult, never parent to child.
Yeah.
And that was even at a young age. You know, my dad and my mom, really, both of them were very good about really explaining things on that kind of level.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that a lot. Um, Next thing, what would you attribute to be the leading causes affecting masculinity in society today?
Atrazine. You know what that is?
No, forgive me.
Oh no, it's yeah, I'm being partially serious, partially a joke. I don't know if you've ever seen that video of Alex Jones freaking out, saying they're putting stuff in the water, turning the frogs gay.
I haven't seen that video,
Oh
but
my
I've heard a
gosh.
lot about
Okay,
things
it's
in the water.
hilarious because he's in a full on rage and he's like, they're turning the frogs gay. But it's because of this chemical called atrazine. It's a real chemical that we spray on crops, and it seeps into the water, and it is very feminizing, and it actually will change the sexual orientation, not even orientational, like literally biologically was changing frogs in rivers that they were studying. And RFK, even this last year, talked about the dangers of atrazine and lowering male testosterone because it's in our water. We drink it. And then the Biden administration this last year, they were trying to pass a bill exempting companies from lawsuits in regards to pesticides and like glyphosates
I was
and
about to say
atrazine.
glyphosate
Atrazine
is
was
one
one
of
of them.
them. Yeah.
You know, and atrazine was one of them that you could never sue for any damage that had happened to that. And it was like, man, that's crazy. So, not really atrazine, but if anyone has seen the Alex Jones video, it is funny.
Okay, I'm gonna go look it up after this.
You're gonna have to look it up. So, but to really answer the question, I think it's easy to control a population of people
Yes.
when you bring up things like toxic masculinity and you demasculate the men. You can empower the women all you want. They're not rebelling against any authoritative force
Nope.
because you're empowering them. So most likely they're on your side to begin with.
Yep. See it all the time.
Yeah, but when you demasculate men, it's like they're not going to fight back. They have no reason. They're not fighting for freedom like the founding fathers literally were committing treason against the king
And signing for it.
and literally putting their name.
Names.
And who is it? John Hancock, who wrote his name?
The biggest, yeah.
Fucking huge.
The most famous signature in all of America.
And it's like, and I
Actually, probably
think
both worlds.
and it was like, did he have the most to lose? Because he had the most wealth at the time, too, I think.
He funded the vast majority of the Continental Army, yeah.
And it's like, and
And he was
just
almost a
to,
general. Luckily, I think it was Madison who, I think it was either Madison or Jefferson that actually pointed to Washington, who was pretty much the only founding father that not only had military experience, but I think he actually had battle experience.
yeah, he had fought with the British
Right.
prior
So,
to the Revolutionary War.
right. But it would have been, Hancock was basically saying, oh, I'm funding the army. I should lead it.
Mm-hmm.
And either Madison or Jefferson, I can't remember which one, was like, no, Washington should lead it because he actually has military experience. And of course, the other founding fathers agreed. They were like, this is a perfectly logical sense, but clearly
Mm-hmm.
Hancock was not happy about it.
Yeah. So when it comes to society, it's, we're empowering We're empowering women, which I love women. I love my wife more than anything I could have ever imagined. I love my
Right.
mom, my sisters. But the demasculation of men, I think, is a real thing.
Yeah. So then this kind of leads on to the next question, which is, what would you say to people who feel that a masculine man is merely a brute? And how do you challenge that? And I know that you can go pretty in deep with this one, but a lot of people think that masculinity is just toxic masculinity. I know a controversial figure at the moment is, I think his name is Andrew Tate, the guy who got arrested in Romania for trafficking women. But when people say, "Oh, that's a masculine man," that's only one example. I mean, to me, a masculine man is Jesus Christ, for example, and the
Yeah.
apostles, a number of different things. But what would you
Well,
say?
so here's the thing I'm going to say about a brute is
Mhm.
that a masculine man may be a brute until a woman comes and tames him. It's the Beauty and the Beast story.
No.
A masculine man is a brute until again, I'm just taking something from Jordan Peterson because it's entirely true, until he needs it under control for the benefit of the family.
Right.
Like if I think of like one of the closest masculine men I know of, he is the same situation. When he met his wife, it completely turned his life around. He's a guy who, was surfing in freaking Florida when there's hurricanes. It's like, how much on the edge can I live? Because another thing about masculinity is like, are we seeking danger and are we doing things that are dangerous and prevailing? Without that, we just get anxiety over the littlest things.
I agree.
So at a point, there is the aspect of a masculine man as a brute until there's the reason to have it under control for the benefit of your community, your tribe. That's why I say it's like you need that. It's just a trait. It's not the defining thing. So like when I see on social media, someone's like, "Oh, this is a masculine man." It's like, no. That's a trait of the good man or a masculine man, either or. So
Right.
A brute is just the fact it's a trait that the masculine man has that ability to be a brute. And that's what we want to think. We want to think that it's not that the brute's up here and then that makes him masculine.
Right.
It's like, no, the masculine man has the ability to be a brute.
I agree.
And we just got to make sure that we understand where those fall in line. Because it's like, that's why we call little boys brutes. It's like the little monster inside of us. Like, it's like, yeah, he's a brute. He's 4. He's just such a little brute, and all the moms think it's cute until they're 6'3" and they're
Right.
brutes. But then it's like, is he a brute? But then does he make you feel your most feminine when you're in his arms because the woman tamed him?
Good points.
Every woman wants a dangerous man to tame.
Oh, I know. That's why I laugh. You see some of these. I'm not even going to get into it because we need to go to the next question. But anyway,
Okay.
now we'd be here for another hour and a half. Not that I'm complaining, but I just want to make sure that we get through these because I really do want to get to some of these bonus questions. But do you believe that there is a reversal from the emasculation of our society? So presently, in the last couple of months, last year and a half, whatever, do you feel like people are kind of reacting to this? They're moving toward a reversal. And if so, what are the biggest factors that you see leading it? Or do you think that we're still just kind of plummeting down this path of emasculating men?
I think we're plummeting down, but I think due to social media, there's a few men who are coming across like-minded men
Okay.
who are starting the reversal.
Okay.
Because if you look abroad as the country, no. But I think some of the guys with the biggest platforms, you had like Andy Frisella, who he only talked about business for the longest time. He had the #1 business podcast on Apple. Are you familiar with Andy?
No, I'll have to look him up though.
And then he completely went away with that and said, I have the number one business podcast on Apple. I'm going to go full on talking about politics, society, and men. And he did. He went a complete reversal. And unapologetically, he's been calling out men since like 2018, 2017 on his, it's called Real AF, the Real AF podcast.
Okay.
And then you got guys like how you've came across myself, you came across Adam Allred, and there's a series of other men out there who are talking about it. Because if we don't talk about it and spread the word, spread content, etc., it's just going to keep only getting worse. But I think because of conversations, podcasts, it's going to make the turn, and I think it'll probably end up hockey sticking. I hope, doing a hockey stick.
Yeah.
And then it's going to find some sort of balance, because I don't think masculinity is for everybody. I don't think it ever was for everybody. Like they made a movie called The Revenge of the Nerds for a reason. Because we got to think, for how many tens of thousands of years was currency not a factor in a man's outcome of life? For hundreds of thousands of years, it was zero.
Right.
There may have been a king who had these things, but for everybody else, that wasn't a thing. Now, I still think it's great because I live in this society. So it's like, okay, let's make dollars. But yeah, I definitely think there'll be some sort of pendulum swing and even out, and the emasculation will go away. But I think it's trying to turn a corner, but hasn't turned the corner yet.
Okay. No, and I agree with you there. I think people are definitely becoming more aware of it, and they're changing. I mean, I think about how, for example, like when I was in high school, you had the jocks that were perceived as being X level of masculine, but just not very. And I think what people are really coming into now is that they're realizing that regardless if that is your strength, right? Like, have you seen Man of Steel?
No.
Okay. Superman movie. Good movie. They present to you General Zod, who's like the leader of these armies, or Krypton's army, where Superman comes from, and then they show you what Jor-El is, and Jor-El is Superman's father. The House of El, divinely descended, whatever. He's one of the scientists, right? When you see him in Man of Steel, if you had to think of it, if I told you, tell me what a scientist looks like, you'd probably tell me a white coat, glasses, thin, or perhaps overweight, etc. This dude is a major warrior, goes absolutely toe to toe with Zod, and would have probably won the scuffle that they got into had it not been for Zod pulling out this blade and just stabbing him, right? But you see, he goes absolutely toe to toe with the warrior class, because in their society, it's depicted like Brave New World, right? Everybody's designed based on their breeding program to be a certain way. These people are scientists, these people are warriors, these people are farmers, whatever. But you see it, and you see the pinnacle, in my opinion, of what masculinity could have been shown on a screen, because you have this guy who has his natural strength, which is to be this brilliant thinker, right? Because we all need thinkers, right? That's why the wheel came along, fire, metallurgy, I mean, all these different things, all these advancements. But he was a full man that used all of his physical strength, his mental strength, his spiritual strength to carry out his will, right? And he broke from hundreds of years of tradition that they had in Krypton, where people were part of a breeding program. They were made to be a certain way, and that's how they benefited society. And he said, F that, we're going to have a child naturally, which is how Superman is born. And he says, I'm not going to stop you, or I'm going to stop you from trying to stop my son. And there's this brilliant depiction of it at some point. If you ever get a chance to see that movie, it's a great movie. But I think that particular character is kind of one that we're seeing now, and people are waking up. And I think that not only that, there are men like you, Adam Allred. If I had to think of something that was very healthy, right, I think about that example. I think a lot about Captain America, right? and I say that because I think that very moral man, even before he got the super serum, he was this weak, physically unimposing type of guy, but still always did the right thing, was willing to put himself in for the sacrificial play to help others, that kind of thing. And then he was imbued with this strength and did these things, right? When we look at just the story of Jesus, my favorite, and I'm not a biblical expert, but my favorite verse so far in the Bible is Luke 23:24. And it's forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And I think about that all the time. Talk about caring so much about people, other people who are the worst of what could be, putting Jesus through these things. And his first thought is forgiveness, because he just thinks about things on a level that is far beyond anything that we could even begin to comprehend. And there's just so much. But anyway, we're getting on to some of the different questions now. This is USA.
Well, hold on. I want to keep touching on what you were saying. So 2 things, the forgiveness thing. I'm always telling everybody they need to forgive.
Yeah.
Do not hold a grudge. I've worked with men who've gone through divorce, and it's like, you realize you're going to have to forgive her.
Yeah.
And their initial reaction is like, no way. I hope her house catches on fire. But it's like, no, you have to forgive her. You will. And then I want to go back to the thing, how you're saying, like the movies would talk about like jocks not having the brains. I think it's a terrible stereotype.
Agreed.
Because if you look, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, the clinic that she works with has done studies on the IQ of children with men who have lower body fat and higher muscle mass, and how they have higher IQ, and the testosterone levels of these men and the IQ of their children. So it's definitely one of those things where it's like, it's a bad stereotype.
But are you surprised that it's perpetuated in society?
No, it's not at all. I mean, me and my wife watched, we did a little date day and watched a Netflix movie. And there was the kid from the movie Maverick. They're with Tom Cruise, the Top Gun movie.
No, I've seen it. I'm just trying to think. There's Glenn Powell who plays
that guy. That guy. So he's the star of this movie.
What's it called?
I don't know.
Okay.
He goes on a date with a chick, sees her later at a wedding.
Oh, that's I know which one you're talking about. It's Anybody But You, or Anyone But You.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I was like, this guy, he's the good looking guy, he's in shape, but his character, he's such a pussy.
Oh yeah.
Such a pussy. And I'm like, why is it that we are continuously making movies like this? It's like, how do we make a movie? And this is, I put it out on my social asking people, like, can someone give me an example of a movie that's based on a relationship where it's a masculine man and a feminine one? Like, can anyone just give me an example? And nobody gave me an example. Because I can't think of one. Now, are there movies where there's a masculine man in it? Yeah. But is the movie based on a relationship? Because that whole movie is based on a relationship.
Oh, I would tell you that to me, Cinderella Man is probably the best depiction of a masculine man and a feminine woman.
But is that movie based on their relationship, or is it based on him going through the series for a fight?
So Cinderella Man
I have not seen that in a long time.
Yeah, so I try to watch that movie probably about once a year at least. It's a good reminder. It's part of my list of movies that I try to watch at least once a year alongside Gladiator. Which, obviously you and I have a lot of affection for the movie Gladiator, but the reason why I really liked Cinderella Man is because it's supposed to be kind of like a biopic on him. I mean, it's basically his life, but it's fictionalized at the same time. But he actually was a real person, so it's it's more like creative nonfiction. Like it's not a documentary, but it's a movie about his life. And for me personally, the thing that I love the most about the movie is how he fights for his family to try to provide the best situation that he can, the lessons he teaches his son and his children, the sacrificial love that he shows for his family. But then on top of all that, the other thing that I really love is that Renee Zellweger, who plays the wife, is just his rock. She's with him all the time. You know, he feels like he's failing the family because he can't provide what he used to be able to provide, like a lot of people felt in the Great Depression and at other times throughout history. But it's them together. You see her and her feminine energy. You see him not only because he's a boxer, but because of the responsibility he shows. At one point, he breaks his hand in a boxing match that ends up being thrown as a no contest. They put a cast on it. The guy goes to work the next day. He covers it up as much as he can. Seeing that kind of a movie, I think, is a perfect blueprint for what a young man should aspire to be. Right? You see this guy who goes through really hard times, doesn't stop, there for his family. His wife supports him because she believes in him to lead her and to lead the family out of this mess. And I think the beautiful thing about this character is that even if he doesn't succeed, right, and she tells him that, you don't need to go into this last fight where this guy has killed people in the ring. You've proven everything you can to me. I think what she loves about him is regardless of him winning or losing, she loves her husband because he doesn't stop trying to continually improve himself. It just happens to be through boxing, right? But I think the problem is there are too many men who just throw in the towel. And it's like, not everybody's perfect, right? But so long as you're trying and you're getting in the fight every day. I mean, we all get knocked down. We've all had moments where we've been knocked down. But I think that movie is a true depiction of what a good relationship is.
No, I'm going to have to watch it.
Yeah, I've got like I'm a big movie buff, but anything that kind of relates to that, I'll let you know. I got a list. But so on to USA 2050. In a perfect world, where would you like to see the USA in 2050 from a masculine perspective? Because if not, we could be here all day.
I hope by 2050, we understand the concept of freedom. We understand the concept of how men and women are complementary of one another. We are not the same. We are complementary. We have biological roles. And if there's someone who's the exception, that's great. There's exceptions in everything. But to try and make it the rule,
of course,
doesn't work. There's not a society that's demonstrated that it's worked. We should stop playing touch butt and just get back to the basics.
I get that. So what things would you do if you had the power to do so to align the country to that kind of vision?
So here's what I would do. Okay. I would try and bring, I think there's a lot to it. So one of the things that I would do is I would fix the money because we have a crazy lack of purchasing power in our country.
Yep.
Okay. The dollar doesn't go anywhere. There was a time when you could pay off a house in Pasadena, California in 3 years, and you could pay off a car in 1 year. Anyone who thinks that's gone, it's gone right now, but it doesn't mean it has to be gone for forever. During that same time period, you only needed one income to support that middle-class family, where again, you would pay off a house in 3 years, not 30, and a brand new car in 1. So we need to change the money in order to get to a place like the 1940s and 50s where every family had the option to have a wife who could stay home if she wanted to. Every home could live off of one income.
Yep.
We need to get back to a place where majority of people are entrepreneurs versus now majority are employees, W-2. People say the tax system isn't fair. It's like, it's because you're fucking W-2. If you get out of W-2, you have the same advantages as everybody else. And men, we have a choice whether we can go off on our own or not. So we need a strong purchasing power so we can bring back stay-at-home moms, homeschooling kids, being entrepreneurs, etc. We need to get men back out into the wild, doing adventures, dangerous stuff, getting out there with nature. Men need to be part of tribes again, figuring out how to get a group of like-minded men together once a week, once a month, and just doing hard, cool shit and holding each other accountable. Because if we're not holding each other accountable, if we're not teaching each other what it is to be a man, a good husband, holding each other accountable, questioning their choices on things, you just slowly start to deteriorate. And then you have this mindset of just a bunch of young men running around with only one thing on their mind. And like, that's what cultivates your mind.
Yeah. Iron sharpens iron. So I agree with you.
So it would be a lot of that stuff. And I could go deeper, but we'll leave it at that.
I know you could go deeper, and for anyone that's listening to this and watching this, if you do want to go deeper, Jesse is a coach. He specializes in really, well, you specialize in a lot of different things, but really making men the highest of their levels. So I would invite you, if you're interested, at least after listening to this conversation, to at least check out, his site, his website, his YouTube. You can find him, Jesse Carstairs. And I have no doubt that you will be more than pleased with what you find. I obviously did a lot of research before I did, so that's why we're here. But anyway, the next question that I have for you is, what things would be part of your ideal nation, and then what things would you take away? And I think you kind of explained a little bit about the ideal nation already. So I guess what things would you take away, from society now and kind of shape it more to that vision?
Oh, I would go back to the Constitution, founding documents. That's easy. There's no IRS. There's no Department of Education. There's no this or that. And people don't understand. Technology is supposed to improve the quality of life with bringing the cost of living down. Improve the quality of living, bring the cost of living down. But it's not happening.
No, it's not. If anything, I think it goes up.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So here's a good question for you. Now we've moved on to the bonus questions. So if you could recite one poem to be your last before your death, which would it be?
Dude, I do not know any poems.
Oh man. Okay. Fair enough. I've got a bunch of them like memorized, but for me, I think it would probably be right before my death. I think it'd probably be Invictus.
You're going to have to email that to me so I can read it.
You've never heard Invictus before?
No.
Oh, man. Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. I think whatever gods may be, for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but I'm bowed. For in this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and though the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid, it matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. William Ernest Hensley. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
You've got a few I'll send you. Good stuff. So if you could build 7 houses around the world, where would you build them? And which style of house/home would you build?
Oof. I definitely would want one in Tahoe, Lake Tahoe. That's where born and raised. And I would want that to be a French mansion. Okay. I would want one somewhere in, we're going to go like Utah or Montana.
Okay.
One of those two, but in, you could say in the forest where I can where I can have like a giant ranch and hunt elk, mule deer. That would be like the modern, like a very modern,
Yeah, modern style house.
yeah, like a big modern house. And then I would go Japan,
I have
south of
one.
France.
Okay.
I would do the south of France. And I don't know that if seven's a freaking lot, man. I don't know where else I would. My wife would probably want something around like New Zealand. I would have to have like a condo in Dubai or Abu Dhabi.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
that's six.
That's six.
Maybe a tiny little cottage in the mountains of Switzerland.
Okay. Seven, not bad. Not bad at all. Um, yeah, I very similar with a couple of those different things for me. Um, always wanted a house in the Rockies, so I would love to have this.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have a house with massive windows, kind of a smaller house, basically on a mountain where I can just go skiing, just exit the house and ski. Uh, I want an apartment in Tokyo, Japan. I don't think I would want a house in Tokyo, Japan. It'd be too crazy. I've always wanted to have a horse ranch, and if I ever get to the point where my life, I think, is worthy of writing a memoir or an autobiography, it would be titled Carthusian Horses. Uh, the
Oh, cool.
Carthus, the Carthusian horses were the war horses from the south of Spain that were a little bit different from the French destriers. The French horses are much bigger, much better for a direct cavalry charge, whereas the Spanish horses were a little bit smaller, more maneuverable, very, very muscular, and they were a little bit faster in terms of changing direction and everything. So, I think if I had to have a ranch, it would be kind of like that Texan feel ranch, but I would have Carthusian horses. And Carthusian horses is what I would title my autobiography, because if I ever get to the point where I get there, I want to import Carthusian horses. I would have a house in San Sebastian in Spain, gorgeous. Um, I also think I would probably have a house somewhere in the desert. I don't know about Dubai, but somewhere around there as well. And then, being from Florida, I'd have to have an apartment in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
One of those ones where you're like looking at the intercoastal and all. This is future, but yeah, along those same lines. So, if you were to take part in a death match, gladiator style, which melee weapon would you use, and which song would you have playing on loop as you battled it out?
So when I saw that question,
That was your favorite. Just admit it.
that yes, but I don't know about the weapons thing. So I'm gonna go basic. I'm gonna go with it was like they would wear these things over their fists that had all the spikes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking
So
about.
like it's not like brass knuckles and it's not a boxing glove, but they would have the leather pad with the spikes
Yeah.
over their fist.
Okay.
I would do that.
All
Yeah.
right.
Because I wouldn't want to fight with a sword and the other guy just be way fucking better with his sword. I'd rather just hand to hand combat,
Okay,
but
so
with the
both of you.
spikes.
All right, so both of you have the spikes.
Yeah, both of
I
us
was
have
gonna
the
say, because
same
if you're if
thing.
you're running around with the leather straps and spikes, and the dude's got a freaking trident, like you're done.
Yes, I don't want exactly. It's like I don't want to fight a dude with one of those. I just feel like I just would be outskilled with a weapon. But if it's just hand to hand and we both have that, because that's how I thought about it. I pick a weapon and that's what we're both using.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. So that doesn't matters. So then, what song would you have blasting on loop while you
The
guys were?
first one that comes to mind, and it would probably change it if I had to think about it, is probably like Master of Puppets by Metallica.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's the first one that comes to mind.
I'm trying to think about what. For me, I think it would be an AC/DC song. I think I would have like Hell's Bells.
Oh, maybe Thunderstruck. I love Thunderstruck.
Thunderstruck
So
would
that would
be.
be like, I would want Thunderstruck as like a walkout song.
Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that.
a walkout song would be Thunderstruck.
And then, so the last question that I have for you, which this is of the ones that I had written down. I actually have two more questions after that.
Mhm.
So, if your life were made into a documentary, which actor, living or dead, would you choose to play your character?
Well, I think the internet would be bummed if I didn't choose the John
John
uh,
Bernthal.
Bernthal, the guy.
Yeah, but who would
But
you
I
choose?
didn't know who he was really. So, I mean, if I had to pick, it would probably have been like put maybe 10, 15 more pounds on Brad Pitt from the movie Fight Club.
Oh, basically, you're getting Brad Pitt from Troy.
Brad Pitt from Troy. Yeah. Okay.
That's probably if you're adding 10 or 15 pounds of muscle, probably Brad Pitt from Troy. He might
Yeah.
be like 20 or 25, but that's probably the closest thing.
Yeah. And I'm thinking that. And I think I'm a little bit taller than him, but in movies, you never know how tall someone is. I mean, Tom Cruise looks huge.
You're what? You're 6'1", 6'2"?
Yeah.
I think Brad Pitt's about that height. I think he's like 6'1".
Oh, I
I think
thought
he's
he was
six.
a little short. I thought he was a little shorter. Then perfect. Maybe I'd
Um,
have him just for a little flattery, a little bit better looking. Yeah.
Fair enough. Um, so the other two questions that I thought of, and I got these questions because somebody posed them to me. Um, if somebody were to stay at your house for a week
Mm-hmm.
and they learned something from you, like any kind of trait, what positive trait would they learn from you, and what negative trait would they learn from you? So, what's the one positive thing, and what's the one negative thing they would learn after being there for a week?
You know what? I want to take back my Brad Pitt answer. I think I would want to go an unknown actor so that there
Okay.
was never any association with another movie that they played.
Hmm.
They only remember that guy as the guy who played Jesse Carstairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right.
Yeah. Because I used to say if I was ever in a movie, I would only ever want to play one movie, one hit, one time, preferably James Bond, and then never do another movie again. So that and no anybody ever watching never said like, man, he was so good in James Bond, or he was so good in this, or he was better in that, or he's been
Right.
cast hyped.
That one thing.
It's just like one thing. So I would probably find somebody and be like, you look like the guy, and him be a kick ass actor, and it's the only thing he
It's just
does.
one movie.
Yeah. So the one thing someone would learn is probably no matter what, I just follow my routine.
Okay.
Up at
So just
4, eat breakfast, go trudge through the snow or the rain, which doesn't happen all the time, but even if there's snow, like it snowed last night here, like we're hitting the miles. We're going to the gym. Even on days I don't want to, I don't feel like going to the gym. It's like, fuck, I just still go.
I think
And then
that
I
rings
work.
true with a lot of America right now. A lot of people just they get up and they're like, I really don't want to go to this, or I really don't want to go to that. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm guilty of it. There are days where I'm like, dude, I really cannot. Like, I don't want to go to MMA class right now because I'm just not feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have fallen into my own problem of avoiding it, and I need to get now. When I have the flu or something, I don't go just to make sure that I don't get anybody else sick because you're in such close combat. Like you're touching, you're sweating all over them. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I don't want to get anybody else sick with the flu. But outside of that, I need to be much better, be more disciplined.
Yeah, and if I'm very, very competitive, and I think I would have done good in a past life in a tribe amongst men, because that's when I love to push myself if someone's there. I love pushing myself alongside somebody.
Oh
So
yeah,
we would be jumping in the river, even though the ice froze last night. It's like we're jumping in the river, we're doing these things every day. And it would just be an excuse to just level up. Because it's for me, it's easy to level up out amongst somebody. And now I keep myself on routine when nobody's watching. But if there's someone there, I just love that. It's like I love there just being someone next to you or someone watching. Or I'll like visualize a lot that my kids and my wife are watching, and that just freaking shoots me to the moon.
when I think about the people that have helped me level up at different times in my life. So I've torn both of my ACLs. Both of them were freak accidents in soccer. The first one, there was just a hole as I was chasing back a defender, just snapped. And the second one, I jumped to avoid a slide tackle, and when I landed, the turf broke underneath. I was like, "This must be like a thing from God," because for me to tear them both in these ways. But it's funny because when I think about my recovery from my first ACL tear, I didn't really know what I was doing, didn't know what the program was. These kinds of things. Didn't have a trainer at the time, so I really didn't know. I was actually strengthening the wrong muscles, thinking I was strengthening the right ones, this and that. But when I got to having my trainer before I tore the second one, um, the difference was completely night and day. He was really pushing me, really getting me to the next level. And I think having that trainer for so many things. Now I have one as my coach for MMA. He and I get along. He's a guy who's really starting his walk with faith and learning more. There's just something about having that camaraderie with somebody that just completely changes, where you get to. And that's one of the things that I probably miss the most about competitive sports. Played all throughout college. Then after I graduated, we were still part of a men's team with the same guys that I went to college with. And now we've all gone our separate ways, and we just laugh about the good old days. How it's like, man, we used to be in such amazing shape, like all of us, and we all used to be at the top of our game. We did this, and that. And now we're all getting older, separate ways, different responsibilities, and some of us are not as sharp as we used to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they'll realize that, I follow routine, might be a little crazy. The bad things they might learn is I can eat a lot of food. And when I prepare for hunting season, I will have 5,000 calories a day, and I love it.
Because when you hunt, what do you hunt with? I feel like you're a guy that runs with a club and bow and arrow.
I just hunt archery. I've never hunted with a firearm. Yeah.
Didn't think so. You struck me as a guy who probably used a bow and arrow.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hunt?
Mule deer, elk.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you hunted bear as well.
No, here's the thing. I've wanted to hunt bears, but then I'll watch a video of a guy hunting a bear, or I think about it, and it just makes me sad. It's like, man, I don't know if I could hunt a bear. Because I'm not into any kind of predator hunting. I look at it as like they're the ones who get picked on. Not in the animal world, but by humans.
Yep.
And it's like I've never been a bully, and I always try to protect other people from bullies. Like I wanted to pick on the bully. So when people want to like hunt bears, don't get me wrong, I've thought of like one of the things I want to do is hunt a grizzly or a brown bear in Alaska with a bow. But then there's the part of me that's like, why would I do it? And then there's the excitement, the adventure. If people don't hunt predators, the state just hires people to kill them anyways.
Right.
So, and it's like, there's that aspect. For some reason, I have zero hesitation in killing elk or deer. Like, if I could, I would hunt one every week.
Well, but
I'm addicted to. Oh yeah, everything. My dog gets part of the animal. Like I take everything.
Right. So you're doing it for sport as much as you're also doing it for sustenance.
Yeah, I do it. I hunt. I hunt with the mindset that this is literally how I feed my family. I've came back home and I cried once because I did not bring back a deer. And I looked at it as like they didn't get a chance to eat. Like that's how serious I take it. So, but as far as like bears, I'm on this like, sounds really exciting to spot and stalk a bear. And then I'm like, man, I would probably feel so bad.
I think for me, I don't know that I could hunt a bear or anything like that. Not that I've ever hunted in that way, but I think for me, I would prefer to hunt something that I'm going to eat, and I just don't see myself as eating a bear um, at all. So, I mean, I think for me, the most I would do is probably elk, deer. That's really what I would go for. Um, I've never been duck hunting, but if it's an animal that I could see myself eating, then I'd probably hunt it.
Yeah, and bear's really greasy. People say, bears has a greasy taste, a fatty taste, and I like my ground beef fucking ultra lean. So it's like I don't know that I would want to eat the bear.
Yeah, I prefer lean food as well. So we got through kind of those questions. Are there any questions that I didn't get to that you want me to either go back to, or is there kind of anything else that you would want to discuss since we've been on these topics?
Um, not
Because
that
I'm
I
all out
can.
of questions now, at least for now.
Oh, not that I can think of.
Okay.
You even asked the other ones. I thought you had one more for some reason.
Uh, no, I asked you the deathmatch gladiator style. If your life were made into a documentary, the seven houses, the one poem. So those were the four that I had written down. Then I asked you about what attributes would people learn, and what attributes, or what
Mm.
positive would they learn, and what negative would they learn. So I
Oh,
don't really
okay,
have anything else.
maybe that's what it was. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it.
We've been through a lot.
No, this was cool.
Yeah, this was really great, and I definitely want to thank you for giving me your time. I think this has been great. I think there's a lot that people can kind of glean from this and learn.
Hmm.
I can tell you that after having spoken with you, 2 days ago, there were things about my own life that I, really thought about and analyzed and thought, okay, what could I have done better? Speaking to my dad about it, he told me that the best example of masculinity that he had was my grandfather. You
Hmm.
know, I told you my family's a bunch of political exiles that left
Hmm.
Cuba. When my grandfather got the job with Parker Hannifin, the engineering company, he had to open up, Iberia. So there were 2 years where my dad saw my grandfather less than 60 days in a year, because in those days it was just constantly going. And my grandfather was really just, my father obviously forgave him. He never held anything against him, right? The man's got to do what he's got to do to provide for his family. And we don't have the same, we have much more technology now than what we did then. It's easier to call people. In those days, you had to go find a payphone and pray that your family had a phone in the house, and, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But my dad was really appreciative of a lot of what we talked about, and he even started thinking about it. So I think this definitely, I think a lot of what we talked about really rings true to a lot of men, and them kind of thinking about different parts of their lives and what could they do better, and what could they do to sharpen their tribes, and what can they do for their own children, or what do they want to do when they become parents, right? Because you have a lot of men like myself. I'm an unmarried man, no children, but a lot of this conversation has given me different ideas about what can I do with my son or daughter, when I get to that point. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of this is very helpful and very healthy. So I want to obviously just give you the thanks for wanting to meet with me. I'm sure that we'll definitely have another conversation at some point.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I would love for you to come up with another group of questions, and then sometime us talk about them. I
I
think,
can do that.
yeah, I
I
love
can,
when people will ask me a specific question that they want to hear answered. That's probably my favorite thing. It's like, yeah, okay.
yeah, and I try to give you, a lot of what I asked you was based on a lot of the content that I've seen you in,
Hmm.
obviously from the previous conversation that we had involving Kate.
Hmm.
And I can definitely come up with more questions. I mean, I came up with a lot, and I sent them to you, and I was like, dude, I'm sending him 2 pages of questions.
Hmm.
Is he going to be like, dude, this is way too much? And you're like, no, man, keep sending them.
Oh
I'll,
man.
I'll be a part of it. So, um, the couple things that I wanted to ask you before we get going was, for one, have you started reading Gabriel Locke?
Not yet. I'm almost done with my other book.
No, no worries. But when you do get to it, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are. I don't know if maybe
Hmm.
you'd want to have an interview session with myself, and perhaps even my father, and ask us a bit about what we did, if that's appeasing or if that's
Hmm.
appealing to you. But my big thing about you reading Gabriel Locke is, my dad and I really wrote it with a lot of different missions in mind. But one of the things that we'd like to do is provide young men kind of with, I guess because it's a work of fiction, but provide men with a good framework of what we believe that a holistic masculine man would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very curious to know your perspective and your thoughts, when you get there.
Yeah, I will.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, I will get to working on those questions. I'm sure that we'll speak again soon. You answered a lot of them with so much grace and so much depth. It's going to be kind of hard to come up with some new questions.
It's okay.
But,
You don't
but
have to.
No, but I'll get there. And
Okay.
so I'm grateful. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Oh man, thank you. This was a blast.
Awesome. So we will definitely do it again. All right, man.
Yes.